Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today, we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Our first story today comes to us from Always the Noob. I can only book travel in coach class? Okay, let's jump right in. Shortly before COVID brought all manner of traveling work to a screeching halt, I was finishing up a job and getting ready to book my travel home. Normally, everyone would just fly, and in my case, that meant a nice short trip of about 2 hours in the air. However, this particular location and the route back home for me had an extremely scenic train route that took about 12 hours, and as a bonus, I could get a sleeper car for a pretty cheap price, less even than the flight. I asked my boss if there was any reason I had to fly instead of taking the train, as the latter would save them money, and he said it would be fine. I didn't waste his time or mine by mentioning any of the above details. I simply booked my ticket and immediately sent in the receipt for reimbursement. Not 20 minutes later, I get an email, paraphrasing, "WTF is this? I thought you said you were going to book travel that would save us money. What do you think you're doing booking a sleeper car? You're not one of the big shots out here. Send me a new receipt for your coach class accommodations." Okay, as you wish. Cue malicious compliance. Since this happened so quickly, I was able to cancel my $150 train ticket without issue. And since there was no way I was taking a 12-hour train ride in coach instead of a 2-hour flight, I booked my air travel like I normally would and immediately sent in the $450 receipt for my coach class flight. I got yet another email asking me what the hell I was doing. Now, I'm good at booking travel and I know how to find good prices. I knew that there wasn't a cheaper flight to be had, so I wrote back, "Sorry, this is the cheapest coach class flight I could find. If you can find a better one, please let me know before the 24-hour cancellation window closes, and I'll be happy to book that instead." Clearly frustrated, they told me to stop playing games, cancel the flight, and just buy the darn train ticket. I didn't. I took the flight home and got reimbursed per company policy for my coach class flight. I guess the person wasn't really looking at the numbers, all they saw was that there was a sleeper car, and they're like, "Yeah, we're not paying for that." So, OP, you did a great job of making them eat that ticket. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our second story today comes to us from Sunflower Occultist. Came into work anyway? Fine, let's jump right in. To set the scene, I was working as a clothing pricer in the back room of a thrift store that was very demanding. I priced 1,500 to 2,000 pieces a day, because our store manager was one of those guys. He never got sick, was hardly in his office, and micromanaged everything. To top it off, the back room was your typical back room, neither heated in the winter nor air conditioned in the summer. The story. This particular event occurred on a Monday. It was cold outside, and my production manager, Karen, was starting vacation that day. I never called into work, but I was feeling particularly awful and things were coming out of both ends. I had thrown up all night and got hardly any sleep. I called work shortly before 7 a.m., around the time when everyone got there, and shortly before work started. My store manager picked up the phone. "Hey John, I'm really sorry, but I can't come in today. I know Karen is out on vacation, but I'm throwing up and hardly slept." "Oh, I'm sure you're fine, and it'll clear up in a couple hours. Just come on in and do what you can. We can't get pricing done without you." Fine, but I'm leaving as soon as I throw up. Not believing I will. "Okay, fine, Sunflower." I drag myself to the store. Luckily, I lived close by, and see John as I walk in. I point to him and say, "I meant it, John. As soon as I throw up, I'm leaving." He agrees, still doubtful that I will. I slowly do my share of cleaning up the store with everyone else, then walk over to Housewares to grab a reasonably sized vase that we have too many of and a stool. The malicious compliance. I looked white as a sheet and like death, but I sat on my stool and priced for 2 hours. Lunch would do me in. Now imagine, I feel like death itself and I don't want to eat anything. So I get a Gatorade, a red Gatorade. You see where this is going? I drink it slowly and feel kinda okay, but then I stand up to go to the bathroom, which requires walking through the back room and into the store. Oh no, what's that feeling? I quickly grab the vase, throw up every drop of the red Gatorade, and between breaths, I yell, "John!" who's smoking out the back door. He comes in to see me hurling every ounce of liquid in my body. I calmly hand him the vase and say, "I'm going home now." Yep. The aftermath. Apparently, after everyone came back from lunch, the whole room smelled like Lysol. John was a germaphobe, and no one knew where I had gone. I ended up not coming back until Wednesday. My production manager didn't get her vacation. By the time I returned, there had been a couple more callouts, and Karen was mad that John didn't just let me stay home because I ended up passing it around, and now there was no way we'd meet our production targets that week. I did get some jokes about throwing up in a vase, but I just shrugged and said maybe next time I'm sick, John will let me stay home. It's amazing that the managers don't weigh out the pros and cons of having a sick person come into the workplace. They don't really think that, hey, if this one person comes in and spreads this around to everybody else who works here, I'm gonna get absolutely screwed. Another thing I was surprised to learn in this one is that thrift stores apparently have productivity metrics. That's something I didn't know. Our next story today comes to us from Joy Reader Zero. In the days before help centers, let's jump right in. Truly, I don't know if this quite fits on this forum, but I did comply, and it was done with a simmering purple malice. This is many years ago, in the late 80s. I was working in the tech section of a bank when desktop computerage was new and deeply suspect to the owners. Somebody bought a new software program. In typical bank fashion, he ordered it loaded on a junk closet desktop computer which didn't have the legs to run it. Said so right in the documentation, but somebody thought he could bully the machine the way he had bullied his secretary. Remember, this is a long time ago. His generation used a dictation machine, a typing pool, and an adding machine with a crank. They gave this unfortunate configuration to me and told me to make it work without asking for anything that cost money. And I did, pretty much, but I couldn't make it run reliably. The problem wasn't with the poor, suffering, antique IBM PCAT, but with the software. I studied the manual, which did not admit to the possibility of such problems. Troubleshooting was basically reboot and pray. The software company was on the other side of the world, 12 hours offset from our time zone. They didn't have a helpline, just an email ADDI monitored during their office hours. My requests for aid were replied to on the next day if I was lucky. Every email was answered with the same pre-written stock letters. "We didn't read your email and aren't going to, so reboot. Here's an answer to the question we assume you asked. We do not admit that telephones exist, especially if it means getting out of bed. We will not give you the email of an actual person." I documented the whole month-long conversation to a fine, fatuous, fat-headed fare thee well. I was not going to carry the can for this nonsense when somebody tried to blame me for it. Meanwhile, the software company bragged in many jolly advertising emails about how great they are. Oddly, I did not love them for it. In their last email, they informed me that they had set up a user forum where their customers could joyfully burble about how wonderful their software and company was. Do join up and tell the world how you love us. I posted the whole interaction, nearly a month of daily pleas for help, plus a brutally complete recap of the problem to their forum. This was not at all what they had planned for, that someone would actually use it to publicly demonstrate a failure of software, documentation, and support. And by Jove, a near human got back to me as soon as they woke up over there and told me how to fix it, even though I was a Sheila doing a bloke's job. I was very sweet to him and said a number of things he probably didn't figure out for several hours. I think that last line is absolutely the best one of the entire story. There is a famous quote out there, although I can't remember where it's from. It says, "Diplomacy is the art of telling someone to go to hell." Our next story today comes to us from Fantastic Alps, Pizza Delivery Parking Spot. Let's jump right in. 2 decades ago, I was delivering pizza from a downtown Orlando pizza shop. Being downtown, parking was scarce, and the manager had told us exactly where to park and where not to park. At the beginning of one of my shifts, a coworker says to me that my car is getting towed. I run out and my car is hooked up to a tow truck and the driver wants $40 or he's gonna tow it. So I pay the $40 because it's a lot cheaper than retrieving my car from the tow yard. I go back in and ask my boss why I would get towed there. He explains the neighbor no longer lets us use that spot and that it was announced yesterday during team meeting. I was off yesterday, so had no way of knowing that. So I asked my boss for the $40 because I parked where he told me to. boss man said it was my fault because I didn't ask. I reminded him I asked back when I started the job, and this is where you said to park. We go back and forth a couple of times, and he says I should ask each shift. I clarify, you want me to ask you where to park at the beginning of each shift? Yes. Okay, I will. Next day, I clock in, loudly so all can hear, "Boss, where should I park?" He tells me and I comply. Next shift, same thing. No matter what he was doing, I would stop him to ask where should I park. About the 6th time, I walked right into a meeting he was having with his boss and stopped them so I could ask. After this, he pulled me aside and said, "You don't have to ask me at the beginning of each shift." I replied, "Do you have my $40 for getting towed?" "No." "Then I'm going to keep asking." This caused a meeting between me and his higher up. Same dumb crap from his boss. I can see I'm not getting the $40 and our relationship is done. My next shift, I use my boss's register code to open the register and take the $40. No record of me being in the register that day. That was my last shift there. My malicious compliance didn't get the job done, but it was fun to interrupt my boss no matter what he was doing. Well, here we go into that little bit of a gray area because being a public channel, I absolutely cannot condone theft from the register. But what I can say is, finding a way to get compensated for an at-work expense seems like an okay thing to me. I love how your boss's boss wasn't willing to listen or help out at all there either. That sounds really familiar, honestly. Our next story today comes to us from Indaru. I guess I have free internet now. Let's jump right in. So I started a new job at the end of June. Better pay, better conditions, and lots of perks that I'm still learning about and trying to use. About a month after starting, I got called by my internet provider saying that my plan finished, and so the price is increasing. I was a bit annoyed, seeing as I was under the impression that my current plan increased already and was final. I could be wrong, but throughout the conversation, I was trying to protest against the price increase. At one point, I said something like, "Why are you raising the price? The prices for internet have gone down, and I've got the lowest bandwidth, 40 megabits per second. I can get 10 times the bandwidth from another company for the new price you're giving me. I'll change providers if you increase the price." My complaints and protests fell on deaf ears. That is the policy, and there's nothing I can do. They also said, "These charges are final. Please don't call us about the charges again." I was planning on switching providers and started looking into prices, but I was very busy at my new job and kept putting it off. At one point, I learned that one of our perks, since we mostly worked from home, was to get a refund for our internet bills. Great. At least it won't be coming out of my pocket, I thought. It was retroactive from my start date, so I looked in my email for the receipts, and the last one was for July, billed in August. But at this point, it was already mid-September, and I wasn't charged for August. That's weird, I thought to myself, and decided to keep an eye on it. It's now November, and I still haven't been charged since August. I was worried that it might get disconnected, but at some point I mentioned this to a friend who said the same thing happened to him with the same provider, and he had free internet for a year and a half until he moved and called so his new apartment would be connected. They said they couldn't find him in the system, and he joined as a new member. I was going to call them and tell them about this and ask to join a new plan, maybe cheaper, but then I remembered how they said that the charges were final, and I shouldn't call them about the charges anymore. Fine by me. So I was only charged once at the higher price, and I got that refunded. I guess I have free internet now. Oh, OP, you're lucky. For 1 gig down and 30 meg up, I pay $115 a month Canadian here. I would love to have a few months of free internet because, heck, this bill adds up really quickly. And it really gets my goat that when you've been with a company for something like 20 years, they're still not willing to offer you any kind of discounts, yet they will trip over themselves to offer the best discounts to the new customers. Our last story today is a really short one that comes to us from NoSuite4190. You should have counted before you left. Let's jump right in. My dad was a tire builder and union organizer in Detroit. At our local bank, there was always a sort of conscious condescension by the tellers for blue-collar workers. My dad was in weekly to deposit his check and take cash for the week. He finished one visit and turned away and walked a few steps, then turned back to tell her he got the wrong amount of cash. Before he could say a word, she snootily said, "You should have counted before you left my window. I can't do anything for you now." He smiled and nodded and walked out with his extra $50. That was a good week for us. As a reference, gas was 19 cents a gallon at the time. The next week, he went to a different teller and waved casually in response at the former teller's frantic motions to see her. $50 was a small fortune back then, but $50 now is still a lot of money. Bank error in my favor. You know how much ramen I can buy for $50? Check out all 6 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.